Welcome, everybody. Thanks so much for coming today. Thanks for your patience as this panel ran a little bit long. This is the 3 o'clock slump, so everybody's got to just get a little more energized, even though this is like the low point of the day. So parenting, excitement, let's hear some cheers. There we go. Okay, great. Now that you're in the cheering frame of mind, we can cheer again. First of all, my name is Zibby Owens, and I will be moderating today. I'm the editor of On Being Jewish Now, which is a collection of 75 essays by authors and advocates that came out a year and a half ago. It's been on the USA Today bestseller list for 27 weeks, so that's really exciting.
Amazing.
And my regular job, so to speak, is I host a daily podcast called Totally Booked with Zibby, and love supporting emerging authors and all the exciting releases. And I was thrilled to be able to get to know Bianna Golodryga because of that. I had her on my podcast, we did an event together. I also have a bookstore in Santa Monica called Zibby's Bookshop, and Bianna went to that too. So now we will turn the tides over a little. Welcome to Bianna. Cheer again.
Thank you.
Bianna, if you don't know, is a CNN guru and hosts Frontline with Zane Asher, and is just used to be at CBS This Morning, and she's just amazing. But today we're here to talk about Don't Feed the Lion, her fabulous book about anti-Semitism for kids of a certain age, and it is a fabulous read. There are kids here who've come just to blurb it and give their endorsement, and it really is one of those books that even kid book lovers, kids who don't love to read books, love this book. So that is hard to do. Congratulations.
Thank you. It is an honor to be with all of you here. Typically in my industry, when it's 3 o'clock and everyone starts to get fatigued, they turn the air down, very cold. We won't do that to you, but hopefully we'll keep you alert today. Zibby, I just have to say thank you for everything that you have done. Zibby literally has been a saving grace for Yonit and me when we sought out to write this book. We clearly saw that there was a need and a void to fill, and naively we thought that we would be able to find a publisher given our stature as journalists and our connections in the publishing world and the television world. And as Zibby has chronicled, and as we have sadly found out over the last year and a half or so, it is very difficult to write any books on this subject matter. It shouldn't be, but that's the reality we live in. And so Zibby has been a saving grace for so many people and offered the platform for your podcast and for your bookstore, and it has just meant the world to us, so thank you. Thank you for everything that you are doing for the publishing world, for Jews, and for getting our stories out.
Thank you. We're just going to keep talking about each other. We're going to forget all of you are even here. No, thank you for this. Why don't you tell everybody here what Don't Feed the Lion is about? Has anyone already read it, by the way? Oh, a bunch of people. That's good.
Okay, so I will try to keep this quick. Don't Feed the Lion was a book prior to 4 years ago I would have never thought about writing. It's a book for middle grade readers, but I hate to even pigeonhole it to that degree because it's a book for families, for teachers, for parents, for coaches, for everyone. It was inspired by my own son. I have two small kids. My daughter's about to be 10 and my son is soon to be 14. And you'll recall that prior to October 7th, and going back millennia, but let's just talk about the last 10, 20 years or so, we have seen a huge spike in anti-Semitism, separate from what we've seen following October 7th. And in about 2022 or so, we started seeing a number of high-profile celebrities and influencers, sports figures, making blatantly anti-Semitic remarks and posts on social media, and really dabbling in disinformation, misinformation. And it was less their actions and more the lack of any sort of price they had to pay for it and consequence that was really alarming, especially for my kids and for my son at the time. He was 11. And he's a huge sports fan, and we were going one night to see one of Kyrie Irving. I'm sure everyone knows who he is. We were going to see the Brooklyn Nets play, and on our way, our son turned to my husband and me and said, why are we even going? Doesn't he hate me, or doesn't he hate us? And I was just, I was shocked. It was like a gut punch. I didn't know how to respond. And we went to the game, and I thought in the back of my mind, I'm just going to reach out to his school tomorrow, because this is post George Floyd, when thankfully so many schools, so many, I would say just society in general, had invested so much time and resources, but especially in academia, for talking to kids about hate, racism, social justice, and injustice. And I thought, I'm sure they have some resources to address anti-Semitism. And when I reached out, I was shocked by the response, which was, we don't have anything. At Jake's age, we just wait for them to perhaps raise it themselves in class. And after doing a little bit of research, it was clear that there were plenty of books on Jewish holidays for young children, kindergartners. And there were a lot of books on deeper, conversations surrounding the Holocaust and other tragedies in our Jewish history after high school. And there was nothing for this very inquisitive, smart, impressionable age group that was, my kids and preteens. And this was also the age group that still talks to parents and asks their parents questions, and one generation or two removed from what we've seen unfold on college campuses. So the seed was planted then, but it really was October 7th when I and Yonit, my co-author, who's supposed to be here tonight, sadly, there, as you know, is another war going on in the Middle East, and she is the main news anchor in Israel, so she had to stay behind to cover all of this. But she and I have known each other for many years. I reached out to her for all information surrounding October 7th, and we had just been in touch daily after the attacks, and just felt like we needed to do something, we needed to contribute something. And she went and found the date in our WhatsApp chat, but I think it was like October 20th, when I had suggested writing a book on this issue, because we knew even then we started seeing a spike in anti-Semitic incidents and attacks. This was even before the IDF went into Gaza. So we set out on this project. She, even though she's Israeli, she spent her formative childhood years here in the United States. She's very familiar with U.S. schools. And we decided to write a fictional book that, to avoid getting caught up in any sort of what I find is, almost red herring type of conversations and debates over what's anti-Semitism and what's not. This is war related. It's not, we decided to avoid October 7th altogether and set this in a pre-October 7th, 2022 environment here in the States.
And what's really great about the story is it's not just about the kids. It's how the whole family has to rally, has to figure out how to handle when things go wrong in the school environment. And that is what happens to us as parents and families when something happens to a child of ours. I have 4 kids, ages 11 to 18. Everyone is involved. We feel it perhaps more deeply than if it happened just to us.
Yes.
Although that also is not so good.
No, but when you see it in real life impacting your kids, and you see the adults in their lives aside from their parents, but they're, the second most influential people in their orbits are their teachers, their coaches, their principals. And so the summary, the premise of the book is, those who've read can tell, inspired by real life events. And there's a Jewish family. They reside in Chicago. It's a brother and sister, Annie and Theo Kaplan. Annie's 11. Theo is 13. They have a wonderful set of grandparents who are immigrants from Israel who came to the U.S. in the 1970s. And their lives are everyday, average American family lives. They celebrate Shabbat together every Friday. That's sort of their custom. And the shockwave begins when one of Theo, who's a soccer player, he's 13, he's co-captain of a soccer team, he's studying for his bar mitzvah, when his favorite soccer player says something anti-Semitic, and it goes viral. And you see the impact of not only that, but the lack of response from the adults in their lives, from soccer coaches to teachers and principals. on down. And a day later, there's a swastika that is drawn on his locker in the gym. And so you see that the impact this has on his life, on his sister, and it's told through three voices. So we also have a non-Jewish ally by the name of Gabe, who is new to the school, new to the city. He is 13 years old as well, and he comes in carrying, I would say, a moral compass and empathy that makes him wise beyond his years, but also centered on a lot of pain and his own tragic background. He's lost a parent, he's biracial, his father is serving in the U.S. military overseas. So he, also brings a different perspective that I think is important, and hopefully that's how we all raise our kids, to judge other people not by what they see and the reality that they think they encompass, but what lives they lead outside of school and what their backstories are, and to be very sympathetic to that. So every chapter is told in a different voice. It's Annie, Theo, and Gabe.
Well, I think that the book also shows what I find to be one of the most shocking things about this period of time, which is that it was supposed to be, when you did something wrong, there were consequences. And that's how at least I'm assuming most of you are pretty good parents, or you wouldn't be in this parenting panel, but there are consequences to behavior. You can't say bad things about somebody, especially publicly, without getting in trouble. You couldn't say these things, and yet suddenly nobody is getting in trouble if they talk about if it's related to Jewish issues. Anything else, they're still getting in trouble. But what is protecting everybody around this issue? And how are kids and schools and everybody supposed to handle it?
Right, and so, this book, newsflash, is not for anti-Semites. So there is one anti-Semitic character in this story, and that is the sports hero. And everyone else is dealing with anti-Semitism in a way that perhaps may not seem as sensitive, and I'm talking about the adults in their lives. No principal, no teacher, no coach says that these comments were, that they endorsed them or that they didn't take issue with the swastika. But like so many events that I'm sure you've encountered in your life, I know I did in mine as well, when it relates to issues like anti-Semitism, there's sort of a form of gaslighting that we Jews feel in being told, it's not what you think it is. It's not as bad as you think it is. You're overanalyzing it. It's not anti-Semitism. It's something else. We took care of it. We erased the swastika, or we painted over it, so nothing to see here, move on. These are sort of isolated incidents and don't speak to a larger issue and a larger crisis going on in society. And so it's sad to say, but we were able to write this book in a relatively short period of time. And again, we're 5,000 miles apart and we have day jobs. But yet there was so much material, sadly, that we could bring to the table. So many of these encounters and plot lines in the story are based on real-life events that have happened in my family. I have stepkids who are 26 and 24 now, but I vividly recall in 2017 when they were in high school in D.C. and we had consecutive incidents in notes home about swastikas being found on school property. And after a certain point, my husband reached out to the head of the school and said, this is a real issue. My stepson was very troubled by it. And my husband just said, you're not taking this seriously enough. You can't have kumbaya sessions every single time there's a swastika. There's a real problem going on at your school and you need to treat it as such. And the response was, I'm shocked by your tone, Peter. There were not swastikas painted. One, because my husband said they were painted. One was in pencil, and the other was, on a dry erase board. So nothing to see here. And so that almost exact incident is in this book. So everything that you read here, a lot of it may seem like it's taken out of context or an exaggeration, and sadly, it's based a lot of it on reality.
One of my kids' schools, they had the same swastika incident. I feel like I've had to reach out to all the headmasters. I've gotten very friendly with everybody. Like, just writing again. Just, how's everything going? We just want to report. Make sure you know this is going on. I am curious how you're handling kids' schools. It sounds like that was, very proactive on your husband's part. But what responsibility do we have as parents to get involved on the education side? You're doing such great work by trying to get this book into as many schools as possible. And P.S., if you are affiliated with a school and you want Bianna to come talk, I'm just going to offer her up. It's really great and makes such an impact on the kids to be able to talk about it. But I think it's a unique time that somehow it's falling on the shoulders of parents to advocate for an entire group of people, and even the diversity committees don't address these types of issues. So we find ourselves dealing with our kids and our kids' schools at the same time. How do you balance all that?
It's a work in progress. I have two kids, as I said. One really took this issue to heart, especially after October 7th. I mean, he follows the news every day. Was very worried about Israel and anti-Semitism. We had his bar mitzvah in Israel exactly a year ago. But he was a changed child after October 7th. It was just sort of our storyline that we're American. I was born in the Soviet Union. We're New Yorkers. Oh, and by the way, we're Jewish. And now he identifies as a Jewish American. And so there are certain things that I think we took for granted. Even when I tell my story, my immigrant story, anti-Semitism was always part of our history. Yes, we encountered it here. I grew up in Texas. I was the only Jew in my school for a while. We're all of these story plots about being one of the only Jewish families, and tell us about Judaism, and meeting friends that had never met a Jew before, but it was never to this degree, and I never in a million years would have thought that I would be living in New York City and talking about anti-Semitism and concerned about, whether or not you can put a mezuzah on your door and what you talk to your kids about. This has been happening right before our eyes. Our eyes haven't been open to this. This didn't start on October 7th. I think it's pretty clear that there is a big problem in our education system as it relates to this issue. I think people don't want to talk about uncomfortable events that happen thousands of miles away. A lot of people have their views on the Middle East, but that we live in a reality where, politics aside, the fact that Zionism is now a dirty word, a controversial word, we have to preface interviews and conversations with people by asking whether they believe Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. Like, who would have imagined that this is where we'd be? And again, I think for me, I listen to my kids or my son about it because it's not something I experienced. So I think as a parent, it's sort of a role reversal. We typically teach them and learn from, they learn from us. And I think we're in an environment now where, I don't know about you, but I didn't experience this level of anti-Semitism growing up. So having honest conversations and asking our kids, how are you feeling about it? What do you think about it? What are you hearing from your friends? Does this come up in conversation? Do you talk to teachers about it? I think this is sort of a humbling moment for us as parents, and we should really try to take guidance from our kids as they're going through this. And to your point about speaking at schools, Yonit and I, we love speaking in any sort of environment, and temple, synagogue, JCC, any organization, but the most rewarding, I think, experience for us has been speaking to students at schools. And there is a bright young 7th grade boy sitting here with us who, when I went to go speak to a school a few weeks ago, stood up. He was sitting in the back of the room because he's a year younger than the grade I was speaking to, and stood up, and he had read the book, so thank you. His name is Wolf. He is here, but he also said something that none of the teachers and sadly not enough adults are saying, and this is wrong and it's unacceptable, and why is this happening to us? And it was such a brave thing for Wolf to do. So I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do. And I kept thinking about Wolf. I reached out to his mom and the bravery that takes. But it also made it clear that these types of conversations need to be had, because it was only given that environment of me coming to speak to students about this topic was Wolf comfortable enough to actually stand up and speak out. And time again, the more and more schools we go to, inevitably we hear from a student or two or three and the conversation starts. They have so much to say, and by not giving them a platform, an opportunity, an hour out of their day at school to know that their teachers and their principals realize the severity of this issue in the moment and are dedicating it to just talk about anti-Semitism. Without that, it's bottled up inside. So I would say that is the most encouraging, and I think as we try to diagnose, we're not going to cure anti-Semitism, but I think having these conversations and letting kids know that we see them, we hear them, and it's not okay is a big first step.
It's huge. Congratulations. Thanks for coming. My kids would be very jealous that we spotlit another kid here. And on Being Jewish Now, there are a number of essays about parenting, and a lot of the authors wrestled with how public should they let their kids be, whether it's singing Jewish songs on the way to school, wearing their Jewish stars out loud and proud, or hiding them, and in what contexts. And it falls on parents to have to weigh in on those types of things. Even when kids have strong opinions, are there situations where, even though we want all the kids to have Jewish pride and to lead us into the next 50, 100 years, which they have to do and should do, when are we putting them at risk? Are we putting them at risk? And how do we know? I mean, parenting is hard enough as it is. Like, we never know if we're making the right decisions or not. But adding this level of management, sometimes I don't know if I should tuck my little star back in my sweater when I'm in a certain situation. So to have to then manage a family of stars, what do you think about that?
And then you also don't want to be a hypocrite in front of your kids. If you're raising them by saying we're proud Jews in this country, when I tell them my family's story of escaping the Soviet Union, where anti-Semitism was institutionalized, only to come here and say, let's not speak Hebrew or talk about your Hebrew lessons or talk about Israel, and you find yourself doing that, and it's shameful.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you want to be safe. And I think another reflection that we've had over the years, and again, this goes back to, is this all because of a war overseas thousands of miles away? Well, one of the answers I always respond with is, this is the best country in the world, and I am so grateful to call myself an American Jew. But I will say, I don't recall ever growing up as a child and walking into a Jewish institution without security outside. I mean, we see what's happened now in post-October 7th and even getting inside this building. But there were bomb threats at my Jewish school, at my synagogue growing up in Texas. There was always a security guard or two outside every Shabbat night, every Sunday school class. I mean, someone was always there, and we just accepted that as normal. And actually, I won't go into a building or a Jewish institution without that kind of security. So I think we as a society need to just really ask ourselves why we've allowed that to be our normal. That no other group, no other minority, no other religious group has had to go through so many hurdles, has had to make such a big investment. I think was it the UJA or the Jewish Federation last week, following the attempted terror attack at the synagogue in Michigan, put out a staggering figure that we spend almost $1 billion annually, 2% of the population, on keeping our Jewish institutions safe, thankfully so, and that was a mass tragedy that was averted. But why? Why is that acceptable as a society? And so, we reflect on these questions. Any day, my answer could change tomorrow depending on the news cycle. So it's an uncomfortable position to be in as a parent, because again, you don't want to be a hypocrite, and you don't want your kids to be ashamed or fearful of being Jewish in America today, but you also want them to be safe.
And I feel it's important for us to be role models in terms of speaking out, and the work that you and I both do with our books and being public and giving talks and all this stuff. There was one situation recently with my younger daughter, and I was going to post about somebody who did something that I thought would be quite newsworthy to reveal who this person was and what they had said that was so terrible. And I was like, I have to do it. I have to speak out. When you see something, say something, the whole thing. And I said, but I think it could potentially come with some risks, And finally, my daughter was like, can't someone else's mom speak out? And I was like, okay, fine. There is a line between protecting ourselves, making sure we are all safe, and advocating on behalf of like an entire population. Where's that line? And you are always on TV, in the news. You are so public. Do you ever feel worried? Do your kids express any fear? Or do you ever feel you're putting yourself at risk with the book or speaking out in that way?
I mean, yes, and my husband is always, criticizing me for not taking security as seriously as I should. We have security at CNN, but it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out how to get into a building. Or, I mean, you could drive yourself crazy if you start to, look behind you and look for, some, people who may look like they've got bad intentions or what have you. Listen, it is a gift to be a journalist in this country. It is a gift to speak truth to power. It is a privilege. And so I don't seek provocation. I was surprised even after October 7th that asking UN women representatives why they haven't said a word about the violence committed against women after October 7th, that these interviews go viral for all the wrong reasons. And I've had a number of high-profile interviews or conversations where I walk into them just asking questions that I think are basic common sense questions from an objective standpoint. And yet when you look at them through the lens of being Jewish or talking about, October 7th, there's always a gray area around it. And, when you call things out, all of a sudden you get attention that, you normally wouldn't expect to get for just stating the obvious. I'm grateful, people criticize, and rightly so. The media can always be better. We can always do better. But I've been given a platform where I can cover anti-Semitism, where I've never once been told, to stop covering hostages or the plight of, women victims after October 7th or the attacks themselves, and I won't stop.
There was a quote earlier at a session today that said, obviously some media misstates the truth a little bit, whether it's intentional or not, and that 70% of people who hear the news, even if they hear a correction, they still believe the lie that was told the first time. I didn't say that very well. Hopefully you were at the session and you heard it better. Yeah. You got it. So the media itself, and I know this is not a panel on the media, but since you're here, what is the obligation and what do we do about all the things that are distorted in the media and that is not really helping our case?
I mean, again, we don't always get it right. There have been a couple of high-profile posts and headlines or tweets, by CNN even over the last few days about our mayor and, some of the coverage of even the terror attack, thwarted terror attack in Michigan. I can say that we have standards at CNN when things are flagged, when things are, when errors are made. We rectify them. We speak out. They are addressed. And when an apology or editorial, headline to address whatever said, tweet or whatever article needs to be added, we do it. And so that's all I can, people aren't perfect, journalists aren't perfect. We aim not to be first, but aim to be right. And this also happens to be a very, very emotionally charged topic, sadly. I think I thought the coverage of the war in Ukraine was extensive, but for some reason, this topic, the war in the Middle East, the small region of the world, generates so much attention, and it has for years. Outsized attention relative to any other conflict in the world. And, this is when I sort of turn the tables on the audience, because we're reporting news that's happening, but we're also reporting news that there's clearly a demand for. So if this is what's getting eyeballs, if this is what people want to see, if this is what they care most about, you have to ask yourself why too. So I can just speak for CNN, and I know that our editorial integrity is very important to us, especially at times like these when trust in the media has been falling. and declining, and it's our job to tell, the truth as objectively as possible, but we make errors, and I say when, as we all do. And when we do, we try to address it as quickly and earnestly as we can.
Well, I think that by diving into stories, even fiction, we can illustrate things that might have legs that go far beyond. But when you get more specific, there's a famous quote about how the more specific a detail you pick, the more universal it actually becomes. Don't ask me who said that. Someone said that. Don't quote me. Anyway, by having a story like yours in Don't Feed the Lion out there, and by sharing people's stories, that's just one way where we all feel we can connect. Because fighting anti-Semitism some days feels like a losing battle. It's not like it's anything new. It's been around for a long time. Probably won't go anywhere. But as I've been tasked even by one rabbi who I spoke to about this, like, our goal should also be, and should probably primarily be, fostering that sense of community among the Jewish people in the face of all of that. Alyssa Rosenheck earlier today spoke about offense and defense, and which team, which part of the team you want to play on, and how we have to actually do both. So how do you think your book and what we can do with storytelling in the literary world, in the media, can really help bring us together?
Well, I think talking to each other is always the best solution, right? So even when I said going to schools and speaking with students who see that, wow, we have third period or the 9 a.m. hour where we typically do X, now it's going to be dedicated to talking about anti-Semitism, because I'm sure when they see that a topic is elevated to that status, to that level, it means that it's serious. It's being taken seriously. It's a problem. I know a number of schools, almost all schools, went through that type of experience following George Floyd, any sort of social justice movements in this country. And so at the very least, anti-Semitism should be given the same platform. And for years, it hasn't been. And also for Yonit and me, as we were trying to publish this book, which was a completely, a story in and of itself, in an uphill battle, we were going to self-publish. Thankfully, a mutual friend, after a year and a half, heard about this book, and he has a small publishing company, and he said, I'll publish your book. But even just that hurdle speaks to the fact that people aren't talking about this. They're not investing in this subject matter. They don't want to. I don't know why. There's some sort of rot in our society. So I think, sure, focus on the media if that's what you want to, but look at publishing, look at a bunch of other industries that are not taking this subject matter as seriously as they should. For Yonit and me, that our goal was to write a book that told a really good story that our kids would want to read. My son is a huge sports fan. We didn't want to leave, girls out. We didn't want to read not sports fans out. So we wanted to write a book that wasn't didactic, didn't feel like homework, was a great page turner specifically for this age group, but that just happened to focus on anti-Semitism and have it pervasive throughout the book, but subtle enough to where it's not so in your face. So when a soccer coach is constantly having to be reminded every Shabbat that, 5 o'clock is when Theo has to leave because he has Shabbat dinner, and he says, do what you got to do, it's a bit of an insult not only to Theo, but hopefully to readers too. And they get a taste of what not being respected as a community group, as part of American fiber. I think when they see this and they see examples that are subtle but very much in your face, they can understand, as a Jew reading it, yes, that's what I go through, and as a non-Jew, wow, I had no idea. I will be more sensitive going forward.
What do you think it means to be a good Jewish mother today?
We don't have enough time in the day. I mean, I ask myself that question. Well, first of all, we go to bed and we wake up with guilt. That is just ingrained in our DNA. I think it's, I look at how my mother raised me and how my parents raised me, and we came to this country with $90 each, no language, no one spoke English. Our first home was about an hour, 15-minute drive from the synagogue we belonged to, and yet every Shabbat, every Friday night after dinner, we would go to services. Every weekend we were in services. They put me in Sunday school. They had not set foot in a synagogue in the Soviet Union because it was institutionalized to where people couldn't practice their religion. And so I think back to the investment that they made and how easily it is to take for granted here in New York when you're surrounded by Jews. And so I just try to emulate what my parents instilled in me. And first and foremost, values, being good people, being honest kids, being respectful to your elders and to others and your peers. But I think, sadly, we've had an awakening moment where for far too long we've taken for granted that we just happen to be comfortable as Jews in this country. And when that happens, bad things start to happen. You can never take, even in the best country in the world, like the United States is, you can't take that gift of being Jewish, which comes with a price tag at times too. You can't take that for granted. We have to be proud of who we are and fight for it.
I think actually as parents today, we have a truly awesome, and I don't mean that as cool, but a truly notable responsibility, because we have to usher in this next group of advocates, not just people who will watch and stand by and plod along, but as they've seen too, it's time to engage. Like, my kids are much more engaged than had this not happened. We are all collectively more engaged because we have to be. But as parents, we can guide that, we can empower, we can encourage, and yes, we can role model, but I think a lot of what we're tasked with as parents today is not just protecting, but pointing them in the way of being outspoken leaders themselves, so that we do have this new generation. Not to mention that we're just putting them out into the world and thereby, repopulating ourselves, which is important.
And the sad thing, what's really dangerous about anti-Semitism is that we know it morphs. It comes, you think about the Tree of Life shooting, and that was a far-right extremist, right? So you have it on the far left, you have it on the far right, and and I'm sure it's been discussed throughout the conversations today in the panels, but what's unique to anti-Semitism is there's the horseshoe theory, where these two sides, ideologically opposed on everything, come together on anti-Semitism and conspiracy theories. And so what we're seeing, I think now, and even among kids, teenagers, especially, who have only seen this form of anti-Semitism, or recently post-October 7th, is that they flock to one party or the other. And then the Jews sort of are stuck like just pawns in the middle, trying and sometimes arguing with each other. No, Democrats are better for Jews. No, Republicans are better for Jews. Or my party has fewer anti-Semites. And that's a very dangerous place to be in too.
So true. We're going to go to questions in just a moment, but before we do, not that I'm an expert on parenting by any stretch, but the fact that you are all here and the fact that we are all going through this insane time in history, I hope you know that you are doing a good job. And just by paying attention and showing up and going to conferences like this and caring, your kids are going to be fine. You're on the right track.
Yes.
And now we'll go to questions. Also, I was supposed to say something about some sort of survey in your app, so please rate us very well. I don't know what it is, but I like good grades. So anyway, okay, on to some questions.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Your approach is obviously a educational, intellectual storytelling approach, which is something that American Jews are really good at and used to. We use our heads to defend ourselves. I'm wondering if what you think about whether we should be also teaching our kids how to more physically defend ourselves, whether it's Krav Maga training, things like this, because I don't see any institutional effort that is funded or promoted by the Jewish community to encourage or fund or spread literally physical self-defense. Just wondering what you think.
I mean, again, in a pre-October 7th world, I don't know what my response would have been to that, but that probably would have been like a tertiary, issue. I think now I don't see any harm in it, and not just because of just safety surrounding being Jewish. I mean, I am a runner, and I run in New York City very early in the morning, and that same issue, there had been a spike in attacks against female runners early in the morning, and I, along with another friend who's a runner, we went and took Krav Maga classes together for self-defense. And so to feel more secure, not in a false sense of security, but in just knowing that you yourself have the skills to defend yourself, God forbid, in a situation, I don't see any harm in that.
This is why I don't exercise. I do think that that's a really good idea, though. I mean, I think this is in part where diaspora Jews and Israelis differ, because there it's part of the culture and everybody's an idea, and they're ready, they're trained. And here we're getting the attacks without the training. And what do we do with that? Even now, I'm hearing, reports from our Israeli friends saying, like, at least we are all in this. It might not be so fun right now in and out of shelters, but we're doing it for a reason. We're united. And here we're all just like waiting. Now what?
Remember, Yonit, when I went to Israel, and I'd gone maybe 5 or 6 times since October 7th, but one of the first times I went, it was 11 p.m. and I was leaving her house, and it was about a mile walk to the hotel. And it just dawned on me that it's 11 p.m. And so I asked her husband, and in Yonit, I was like, is it safe? Can I walk? And he's like, well, you have muggings, we have missiles. So, my safety question had to deal with just that, being, attacked on the street by somebody. And in their mind, they prepare for bomb shelters and missiles incoming.
So I just wanted to say thank you so much for the work you're doing. It's so important. And as an educator, we so appreciate it. I'm just curious, 2 quick questions. So what was the response from your son's school? Did they all read it? I assume it's in their library. Did they embrace it? And then also, when you speak to schools, do you go to schools, are you invited to schools that may not have a very large Jewish population, more schools that are more diverse?
So I'll be honest, I have not been invited to speak at my kids' school. The book is not there. It's pretty, public. And so I don't know what to do with that other than that's just the reality. And I think my kids are grateful. They won't say it, but they would probably prefer that I not come speak in front of them. So, but we have since, and I've got a great little team here, communications team, Aaron is representing. But initially it was very difficult. Like even, network, the more promotion you get, obviously, the more attention you get. And even getting interviews outside of CNN and a few friends at another network, we weren't getting the publicity that I think would have sparked interview requests and invitations from schools to come speak. So that's been an uphill battle. Getting into New York schools has been an uphill battle, but especially now that the war in Gaza is at least technically over, and there's still been a spike in anti-Semitism. I think a lot of schools that were a bit hesitant about having us come speak now realize that this is an issue larger than a war thousands of miles away. So there have been a number of schools that have invited us, private schools, very progressive schools, schools like Wolf's. I don't know that there's a large Jewish community or student body at your school, but I was grateful to be invited. And then again, this book is just as much for Jewish readers as it is for non-Jewish readers. And so it's very important to have allies and to have people, because we'd like to think, and I still believe the majority of people are not anti-Semites. And I think they just need to know that this is a huge problem and how their Jewish neighbors and friends are feeling at this moment. I think there's going to be a lot more empathy the more conversation that we have.
I'm going to try and get through asking the question without crying. It's been a really hard 2.5 years in our home. I have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, almost 8 and 1-year-old, and we've had people yell into our windows and graffiti in front of our house, and I try to be really strong for my kids, but sometimes it just gets me down, and I know that both of you had experiences or days where it just gets to you. And I'm just wondering on a personal level, like how you handle it when it gets to you.
Oh, do you need a hug? Do you want a hug? Do you want to bring? Oh, Someone hug her. Aaron, hug her. Oh, I think you need to move.
So we've actually thought about that, if I can say, but then we had, can I take this back? So just some context, we hung an Israel flag in our window on October 8th. And my husband said to me, he's lived in Israel twice, said to me, we have to really decide if we're going to put this up when we're going to take it down. And we made a pact that we would take it down when the last living hostage came home. We did not think it would take that long. And we have definitely borne a cost for doing that in a extremely politically progressive neighborhood where my kids are learning how to read and walking to their bus stop every day and being like, what does genocide mean, right? Like they're reading the word genocide or reading signs that says Israel murders children. But we've also had people come up to us. And it's scary because we have kind of like, Washington, D.C. because of CNN, I'm sure. We live in D.C. in a row house with a little side patio, and we have like a sukkah, right? And so we've had people be like, is that yours? And we're kind of like, who's asking? And we've had people say to us, oh my God, this gives me so much strength when I see your sukkah. It's given me so much, I will go out of my way to walk past your house to see your flag. And so I believe that we're doing something important, taking down the signs that go up. So we've thought, Zibby, about moving. I would go back and forth about whether that's been the right choice or wrong choice for my kids. But just there's some times where it gets really, really hard. And I feel like this season is one of those ones for me. And I'm just curious how on a personal level you all handle that, because I want to be strong for my kids and lean into joy and lean into pride. But, oh my God, I know you all feel it too. I know everyone in this room feels it. It's an emotional roller coaster. And sometimes you're at the top and sometimes you're at the bottom. So thank you all.
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard, and it's been under our noses for a long, long time. And again, we've just allowed it to be normal. I don't know what's happening in schools and education. And again, people can have their own views on politics and elected officials in a democratic country. You may like them, you may not. You may not like how a war is conducted. You may support it. But no one is saying Russia doesn't have a right to exist. No one says North Korea doesn't have a right to exist. No one says China doesn't have a right to exist. So when you go down that road, and it starts very early, it's overwhelming. And you do realize what a minority we are. Social media has been horrific throughout all of this. And, there are bad days. There are really bad days, and I'm grateful that I have my husband. This has brought us closer than ever before, and he has been my rock. He's been the one who's pushed this book. He gives it to every single person he knows, and we're on the same page. We're on the right side of history. Elected officials come and go. Focusing solely on one country. Criticizing, by all means. We do that here. We do that. That is fair game. But focusing on one country more than anything else, or questioning the loyalty of one religious group and its influence over anybody else, it's blatant anti-Semitism. And so, that's why we as a community need to stick together, and we need to have more conversations like this in schools. I think everything begins with education.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I would also say, in terms of talking to your kids, and everybody makes their own parenting decisions, I've sort of opted for not hiding, because I think it's okay to model. I'm really sad. This friend just posted something really mean about Jewish people, and I feel really betrayed. I want you guys to know, sometimes it really hurts, because then when they feel hurt, they're not afraid to talk about it. They know those emotions are normal and they don't have to hide them. So, maybe don't cry like this every day. But I would engage the kids in the dialogue and not try to hide it and make it seem like everything's rosy and sunshine.
Hi, thank you for everything you do, for being here. I wear multiple hats in that I'm a mom. I'm a stay-at-home mom now, but I used to be an educator. And I have lots of friends who are still teaching and are actually starting to teach your book in their 5th and 6th grade class next week. So we would love to have you. But I'm curious a few things. One is, do you think any of the educators or parents had any missteps in the book? And what can we as parents and educators learn from that? And also, what are 1 or 2 things that you would actually encourage educators and parents to actually literally say to their 5th and 6th graders versus older children, and how that's different? And just anything you'd like to speak to any of that.
I mean, there are definitely educators in this book that have missteps, make missteps from the principal on down. The book is really, the crisis and the conflict in the book comes less from the anti-Semitic remark that the athlete makes, and more about how the community, and in this case the school, responds. And so when the adults in the room, when educators don't respond the way they should, the burden then falls on the kids. And so there's a scene that I find the most powerful for me, that the most painful, but I think the most indelible in my mind from the book, is actually in the principal's office, where Theo gathers the courage to come speak out, thanks to his sister and his friend Gabe and his family, to address the swastika and acknowledge that that was his locker and that it's not okay, to the head of the school. And the head of the school then proceeds to sort of gaslight him and tell him, this is going to, are you sure? I'm going to have to file a report. The team may not be able to go to the soccer championship after this. And, starting to play mind games with Theo. And we've all sort of been in similar situations like that, where you're right and you can't believe what you're witnessing. And again, he doesn't say, I don't like Jews, or I condone that swastika, or, there's nothing that's so explicitly anti-Semitic, but just negating the obvious is painful enough. And so I think for teachers and everyone, we're not robots. People come to class and school with their own views, their own politics, and that needs to be left outside the door. I think another issue that we've run into is, again, going back to social media, where there have been a number of educators, teachers, whoever, whose accounts are public, or that will post certain things online, and their students see it or parents see it, and then this becomes an issue in class. And some of the protests, subtle or not so subtle, that they come in and exhibit or display. There's been something going. I don't know how the Middle East and how Israel and how the conflict has been taught. We assume, we as journalists, we try to do things objectively. I do. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of history. There's a lot of pain on all sides. But you can tell that story accurately, and you can address. It's not either or. It's not a binary. One side's right, one side's wrong, in terms of people in a society that need to coexist together. But when it's not discussed, or when it's conflated with something else, or when one group is viewed as, I think socioeconomic has for some reason been a justification for not elevating anti-Semitism too. You hear it a lot. Well, you're white. Jews socioeconomically, on average, per capita, do better than other minorities in this country. Thus, there's nothing to complain about. We hear that argument too. And we've allowed for it to fester for far too long.
One thing you can do, even for 5th and 6th graders, I happen to have one of each, is point out to them that this is a Jewish author who wrote this book. Not just that it's about anti-Semitism, but look at this amazing Jewish author, and look at all the other amazing Jewish authors who are out there, and go to a bookstore and point them out, even if they're grown-up books. I mean, there's so few things we can all do to help each other out, but I think supporting other Jewish authors and letting people know who they are, following them on social media, buying their books, these are actionable, easy steps you can take to help a population that's struggling, and thereby help the kids as well.
Hi, everybody. I want to again say thank you. My name is Shira. I'm a social worker in the Jewish community. I have both a comment and a question. And my comment is that it seems like this book is a great tool just to teach socioeconomic learning. This idea of socio-emotional learning is very important, and I think some schools really have embraced it and others have not. And so perhaps not through the door of necessarily anti-Semitism, but maybe just through the door of just saying this is a socio-emotional learning tool will get you to some places that you'd like to go. So if that's helpful, great. I'm thinking about the fact that I'm a parent of just one child, and that child is in a Jewish day school in Manhattan, and it feels like the world's biggest privilege, and I know that might not be the right decision for everyone, but I'm curious from your vantage point and maybe other people, how do you decide where to send your kids to school given the environments that they're in and what is coming up? And even for me, who has my child in a Jewish day school, again, at some point they might make a decision to move on and go to like a more mainstream school, perhaps for college. How do we give people the tools that they need to be able to stand up and engage in the tough conversations, which quite frankly my daughter is not engaging in. She's proudly Zionistic. She's just not at the point where she's being pushed with the types of conversations some of the others of you might be facing.
So again, to the point of a pre and post October 7th world, my son is starting high school next year, and he's going to be going to a Jewish school here in the city, which we would have never imagined, nor did we plan for 3 years ago. In fact, we probably, to be honest with you, would have viewed that negatively, because for us it was all about diversity, making sure our kids were in an environment where they were with kids from different backgrounds, religious, and from different countries, and just to get to know everybody and their own backgrounds and their own stories with mutual respect. And the world has changed. My kids have they're 4 years apart. For my son, this has been very difficult, and he didn't feel like some of his concerns and some of his fears and feelings were taken seriously enough and addressed in his environment. Our daughter's in a different position, but it's, to me, it's the best decision for him, we hope. But I keep going back to my parents and growing up, and my mom. One of her favorite days of the year was when I'd come home from school, and our school class pictures would come in the mail, or we'd bring them home. And she was like, "Oh, it looks like a United Nations. It looks like a Benetton ad. Like, it's just every kid from different backgrounds and different ethnicities, and ideally that is a perfect world, but that's not one in which we live now. So I think it's a very personal choice people make, and each family has to make what's best for them. And we're sort of in a split situation where our daughter's staying put and our son is going to a Jewish school. Because for him, just being able to walk into a school and know that the baseline agreement and acknowledgement and viewpoint, it's a very pluralistic school, far, conservative, liberal, but the baseline is that Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. That for him, I think, is the comfort he needs.
I think last question? Yeah, I think it's almost 4. Two questions. Second to last question.
Thank you both so much. I work in the Connecticut region of ADL. I'm the Associate Regional Director there. I follow you both, and thank you for everything you're doing. But I did just want to go back to one thing you said, because I work on the incidents at ADL. It's one of my jobs. So every incident that comes into Connecticut, I take the call, I speak with the people, and when I speak to I can't talk to minors, but when I speak to students who are 18 and older, I hear their story, I hear about the anti-Semitism they've experienced, and I always ask them, how did you develop your Jewish identity? Because my father's also from the Soviet Union, from Kiev. My grandfather on the other side is a Holocaust survivor, so I'm always thinking, how are my kids going to carry on the traditions? And they always say something like either, I went to Jewish camp, or my parents did Shabbat every Friday, or my mother always wore her Jewish star. So I just wanted to go back to what you said about, that families have a choice to make about how much they want to be visible and how much they want to hide, or you didn't say hide, but I'm paraphrasing what you said. And I also wanted to praise the young woman who was crying in the front.
Thank you for calling me young.
Because, your kids are going to remember that you had an Israeli flag in your window. Mm-hmm. They're going to remember. And when they go to college and something happens, they're going to know that my family cares about this flag. And so, by making a decision to hide the Jewish star, or to, not wear the kippah, or put the hat over the kippah, or not go to synagogue because we're afraid for our safety. Like, it may be a personal choice, but it's just not the right choice, in my opinion, given what I've seen. So keep doing the things, and that's the only way. We have to model it for them. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Last question.
Hi, thank you so much. I have a kindergartner. She's in public school, but she went to Jewish preschool, so she knows all the Jewish holidays, and her baseline, like you were saying, is Judaism, but now she's in public school, and I feel like it's only inevitable that one day she will be exposed to these things. And I'm curious to know whether you recommend, and if so, at what age, that we sort of preemptively prepare our kids. Because, I mean, she knows the story of Purim, the story of Passover, that people have come after the Jews before. She knows this, but she doesn't know it's happening right now, and that it's still happening, and she hasn't been exposed to that. And I'm curious if you have recommendations on how to sort of, before a kid is ready to read this book or something, prepare them for that inevitability so they're not so caught off guard by it, and they are ready to face that when it comes.
I say yes. I mean, I don't think there's too much education you can give your kids. I mean, there's a tone and a way of doing that dependent on their ages and their own personalities and emotional sensitivities and how they digest news, and especially uncomfortable news and facts. But the best advice I could give is that when your kids find themselves sadly one day in a situation where they're confronting anti-Semitism, they won't be surprised, and in fact they'll be equipped with a well thought out response.
I always feel like I'd rather they hear it from me. So I try to preempt in whatever language is age appropriate. And I'm actually on the board of the Child Mind Institute. They have lots of guides of how to talk to your kids at different ages about different events in the media and in the world and all of that. So if you're ever at a loss for exactly the tone or tenor, take a look there as well. But I think get ahead of it. But then there's some cardinal rule of parenting, like just answer their questions, but maybe don't go off on too many long tangents.
Yeah.
Like just enough. I learned this the hard way with my birds and the bees conversation. So just enough. Just give them just enough. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you
That was
so
fun.
much.
Thank you.